The hum of the airport terminal was usually a sound I found soothing. It meant I was going somewhere new. But today, after a grueling 3-week assignment in Tokyo and a delayed connecting flight, the noise felt like a drill against my temples. All I wanted was my seat, a pair of noise-canceling headphones, and 10 hours of uninterrupted sleep. I had used my frequent flyer miles to upgrade to first class. It was a rare treat, a reward for the 80-hour work weeks I'd been pulling. As I walked down the jet bridge toward the Boeing 777, I could almost feel the plush leather of Seat 2A calling my name. I stepped onto the plane, greeted by the cool, recycled air and the faint scent of expensive cologne and hot towels. I navigated the narrow aisle of the first-class cabin, checking the labels. 1A, 1B, 2A. There it was, or rather there she was. Sitting in 2B was a woman who looked like she had stepped out of a high-end fashion magazine, though her expression was anything but inviting. She wore oversized sunglasses indoors and a silk scarf tied perfectly around her neck. But it wasn't her that stopped me in my tracks, it was what was occupying Seat 2A. Resting squarely in the middle of my assigned seat was a structured, cream-colored Hermes Birkin bag. It sat there with an air of entitlement, as if it had its own boarding pass. "Excuse me," I said, keeping my voice polite but firm. "I think you might be in my spot." "Well, your bag is." The woman didn't look up from her phone, she simply waved a manicured hand in my general direction. "Sit somewhere else, honey, there are plenty of seats." I glanced around. Actually, first class is fully booked, this is 2A and that's the seat I've been assigned. She finally lowered her glasses, revealing eyes that were sharp and cold. "This bag costs more than your entire wardrobe. I am not putting it on the floor, and the overhead bins are far too cramped. It stays there." I felt a spark of heat rise in my chest. "I understand it's a nice bag, but I paid for this seat. You'll need to move it." "I don't think you heard me," she said, her voice dropping into a condescending drawl. "I'm not moving Berkey, she needs her space. If you're so desperate for a seat, go talk to the help at the front. I'm sure they can find you a stool in the galley." The escalation. I wasn't in the mood for games. I looked for a flight attendant and spotted a young man named Marcus who was busy hanging up coats. I signaled him over. "Is there a problem, sir?" Marcus asked, his professional smile wavering as he saw the bag occupying the seat. "Yes," I said, "this lady is refusing to move her bag from my assigned seat." Marcus turned to the woman. "Ma'am, I'm afraid all carry-on items must be stowed under the seat in front of you or in the overhead bins during takeoff and landing. And since this seat belongs to this gentleman, you'll need to move it regardless." The woman, whom I had already dubbed Karen in my head, let out a theatrical sigh. "Listen to me, Mark, is it? This bag is a delicate instrument of fashion. It cannot be shoved into a bin like a common backpack. I am a platinum executive member. I suggest you find this man a seat in coach and leave us be." "Ma'am, I can't do that," Marcus said, his voice straining to remain polite. "The manifest is full. This gentleman has a confirmed ticket for 2A. If you don't move the bag, I'll have to involve the lead purser." Karen leaned back, crossing her arms. "Go ahead, get whoever you want, I'm not moving." I stood in the aisle, feeling the eyes of the other passengers on me. A businessman in 3A was watching with amusement. An elderly woman across the aisle looked horrified. I felt a mixture of embarrassment and growing resolve. This wasn't just about a seat anymore, it was about the sheer, unadulterated arrogance of a person who thought her luggage had more rights than a human being. The power play. A few minutes later, the lead purser arrived. Her name tag read Elena, and she had the look of someone who had dealt with every kind of airborne tantrum imaginable. "What seems to be the trouble?" Elena asked. Karen launched into her defense before I could speak. "This man is harassing me, he's hovering over me and demanding I put my $30,000 bag in a dirty bin. I feel threatened. I want him removed from the cabin." I couldn't help but let out a dry laugh. "Threatened? I'm standing here with my boarding pass asking to sit down. You're the one holding a seat hostage." Elena looked at the bag, then at Karen. "Ma'am, the FAA regulations are very clear, no luggage on seats. It's a safety hazard during taxi, takeoff, and landing. It could become a projectile." "It's not a projectile, it's a masterpiece," Karen snapped. "And I'm not moving it. If he sits there, he'll scratch the leather with his cheap jeans." Elena's expression shifted. The professional warmth vanished, replaced by a cold, bureaucratic steel. "Ma'am, I am giving you a formal instruction to stow your luggage. If you refuse to follow the instructions of a crew member, we will have to return to the gate and have you escorted off the aircraft." Karen laughed, a sharp, shrill sound. "You wouldn't dare. Do you know who my husband is? He's a major shareholder in—" "I don't care if he's the Wright brothers," Alina interrupted. "Move the bag or we are calling security." For a moment I thought Karen would fold. Her knuckles turned white as she gripped her phone. But then she did something truly baffling. She reached into her purse, pulled out a second, smaller silk scarf and draped it over the bag as if to shield it from our poor gazes. "I am not moving it," she whispered defiantly, "and you can't make me." "The consequence." Alina didn't argue, she didn't raise her voice. She simply looked at Marcus and said, "Inform the captain we have a non-compliant passenger in 2B. We need to hold our taxi and request a gate return." The cabin went silent. The hum of the engines, which had been ramping up, seemed to settle back into a low idle. "You're joking," Karen said, her bravado finally flickering. "I never joke about flight safety," Alina replied. As the plane began the slow, humiliating crawl back toward the terminal, the rest of the first-class cabin began to murmur. The businessman in 3A leaned over. "Nice job, lady," he muttered sarcastically to Karen. "Now we're all going to miss our connections." "It's his fault," Karen pointed at me, "if he had just gone to the back of the plane." "No," I said, finally finding my voice again. "It's your fault. You chose a piece of leather over a person. You chose your ego over the time of 300 other people on this plane." The next 10 minutes were a blur of activity. We reached the gate and the jet bridge was reattached. 2 airport security officers stepped onto the plane. They didn't look like they were in the mood for fashion critiques. "Ma'am, you need to gather your belongings and come with us," the taller officer said. "This is ridiculous," Karen screamed. She was standing now, clutching her Birkin to her chest like a shield. "I haven't done anything wrong, I'm a victim here." "You've interfered with the duties of a flight crew," the officer said, reaching for her arm. "Move now or we will have to assist you." The sight of the handcuffs on the officer's belt finally broke her. She began to sob, not out of sadness but out of pure, indignant rage. She gathered her things, her movements jerky and frantic. As she was led past me, she hissed, "I hope you're happy, you ruined everything." "Actually," I said, as I finally sat down in the cool, soft leather of seat 2A, "I think the flight just got a lot more comfortable." The aftermath. The cabin door closed for the second time. The captain came over the intercom, apologizing for the delay but emphasizing that passenger cooperation was essential for safety. Alina walked by a few minutes later with a glass of champagne. She set it down on my armrest with a wink. "Sorry about that, sir," she whispered. "In my 15 years of flying, that's the first time I've seen someone try to buy a seat for a handbag without actually buying the seat." "She really thought she could get away with it," I said, taking a sip. The champagne was cold and crisp. "People like that usually do," Alina said, "until they don't." The seat next to me, 2B, remained empty for the duration of the flight. I had more room than I knew what to do with. I stretched my legs out, the stress of the previous hour melting away. I looked out the window as we climbed through the clouds, the city lights below shrinking into a grid of gold. I thought about the bag. It was a beautiful object, sure, but at the end of the day it was just a container for things. Karen had spent so much time worrying about her masterpiece that she forgot how to be a human being. She had tried to use her wealth to erase the basic rules of social conduct, and in the end it was those very rules that had stripped her of her luxury. I spent the rest of the flight in blissful silence. I watched a movie, ate a meal that didn't come in a plastic wrap, and slept for 6 solid hours. When I woke up, the sun was beginning to peek over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. As we landed and I gathered my humble, scuffed-up carry-on, I looked at the empty seat 2B. I felt a strange sense of peace. I hadn't set out to get anyone kicked off a plane. I had just wanted what I had earned. Walking through the arrival terminal, I saw a high-end boutique in the duty-free section. In the window was a bag similar to the one that had caused all the trouble. It looked cold and lifeless behind the glass. I smiled to myself and kept walking. I didn't need a designer bag to feel important. I had my seat, I had my dignity, and most importantly, I had the satisfaction of knowing that even in first class you can't buy your way out of being a decent person. The title of the story echoed in my mind. Karen had denied me my seat because of her designer bag, and in doing so she had lost her own. It was a fair trade. As I stepped out into the fresh morning air, I took a deep breath. The trip had been long, the drama had been high, but the ending was just right.